Welcome and thank you for being here. In this quiet telling, we will walk into the hills around Dothan, where an armed company came with confidence and order, only to find their certainty unmade in a moment they could not command. What will be witnessed is a kind of power that does not thunder from the sky, but reaches into perception itself, turning strength into helplessness without a blade being raised. There is a particular light that gathers over the high country of Samaria, clear, hard-edged, and unsentimental. It is the light of a land that has known long summers and lean winters, of stone that holds heat in the day and releases it slowly at night, of ridges that cast narrow shadows and valleys that keep their cool like a secret. In such places, dawn arrives with little ceremony. The horizon pales, the sky thins from charcoal to a washed blue. The first warmth touches the eastern faces of hills, while the hollows remain dim, holding the last breath of night. The wind, if there is wind, comes as a dry hand across the grasses, bending them in small waves that look almost like water from a distance. Sparse shrubs, hardy, grey-green, stubborn, cling to terraces and rocky ledges. Olive trees stand with twisted trunks and patient leaves, their branches not lush but enduring, as though shaped by years of pruning and the constant negotiation with sun and drought. The town of Dothan lies among such hills, set where the land offers enough openness to gather people and enough elevation to watch the roads. The earth there is a patchwork of stone and soil, fields broken by low walls, paths pressed into the ground by feet and hooves, and the occasional stand of trees that marks a well or a place where moisture lingers a little longer. In a world that depends upon sight, upon watching the weather, scanning the ridgelines, reading dust in the distance, the landscape itself trains the eye. People wake early because the day's labor must begin before the heat gathers its full weight. Water is measured, carried, guarded. Grain and oil are not abstractions, but the result of seasons survived. Even the simplest sounds carry meaning. The rasp of sandals on grit, the low murmur of animals in their pens, the creak of wooden doors, the brief calling from one household to another as tasks begin. In such a setting, fear is not an unfamiliar guest. It comes with rumors that travel the roads faster than any single traveler. Rumors of raids, of border skirmishes, of men who come by night and vanish by day, leaving only trampled fields and empty storehouses. It comes with the knowledge that kings contend, and when kings contend, the common ground is pressed down beneath their ambition. Families learn to listen for the wrong sound, the sound that does not belong. Too many hooves, too many voices, an unfamiliar horn. They learn too the calm that follows a false alarm when the heart's pounding slows and the day's work resumes with hands that still tremble slightly around tools. The people of Israel in those days lived inside layers of memory and obligation. Their lives were not made only of the present morning's weather or the state of their own fields, but of ancestral inheritance, tribal ties, and the fragile order of a kingdom that had known division. Their calendar moved with the agricultural year, ploughing when the rains allowed, sowing with hope that could never be fully guaranteed, harvest with relief that always carried the sober knowledge that another cycle would come, and that one poor season could undo years of careful storing. Their social fabric was woven from household, kin, village elders, and the authority of the court and the king's officers, structures that held when life was ordinary and strained when danger approached. They spoke with the land constantly, even without words, reading the soil, the wind, the flight of birds, the shape of clouds. And woven through all this was the presence of prophets, figures who did not belong neatly to the rhythms of ploughing and harvest, yet whose words and actions pressed themselves into the life of the nation. Elisha, the man at the center of this account, is not presented as a soldier or a court official, but as one who sees what others do not see and speaks what others do not dare to speak. The text sets him in the midst of political tension, not by choice of ambition, but because kings fear what they cannot control. It is written that the king of Syria made war plans, and again those plans were disclosed, and again the intended ambushes failed. In a world where advantage depended upon secrecy, this was not merely a nuisance, it was intolerable. It felt like an invisible hand, turning every scheme inside out. Within the Syrian camp, such repeated frustration would not remain abstract. It would sink into the mood of the officers like grit. Maps would be unrolled and rolled again. Routes measured, messages sent, delayed, corrected. A commander's voice would sharpen with impatience, then fall into a tense quiet as he looked from one face to another, measuring loyalty, searching for the leak. Suspicion would move through the ranks with the slow certainty of smoke. In every group of men, there are those who look down too quickly, those who speak too loudly to conceal their nerves, those who suddenly become very quiet. Accusations need not be spoken aloud to be felt. The very air changes when a camp begins to turn on itself. Then comes the discovery that the issue is not treachery among their own, but knowledge that seems to reach beyond the ordinary boundary of human hearing. The report is given that Elisha the prophet tells the king of Israel words spoken in the innermost chambers. Even without embellishment, the idea itself carries a chill. It suggests that privacy is an illusion, that walls and distance do not protect. For a military mind that relies upon the secure interior of command, this is destabilizing. What can be done with a man who cannot be outmaneuvered because he seems not to be outpaced by information? A decision forms, hard and direct. Find him, take him, remove the source. So a force is sent, horses and chariots, and a great host by night. There is something about a nighttime march that changes everything. The world narrows to the rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather, the soft clatter of harness fittings that must be kept as quiet as possible. Men speak in low voices, or not at all. Breath becomes visible when the air is cool enough, then disappears again. Torches are covered or spaced so that light does not betray the column from far away. Above, the stars look indifferent, scattered across a black depth that makes human intention seem small. The ground, unseen, must be trusted. A misstep can break an ankle, can spill a rider, can send a ripple of noise that carries farther than expected. Commanders learn to use hand signals. Every man becomes more aware of his own body, the weight of his weapon, the tension in his shoulders, the dryness in his mouth. The purpose is simple: arrive before dawn, surround, and close the net while sleep still holds the town. By the time morning begins to lighten the east, the encirclement is complete. Dothan, with its ordinary houses and low walls and paths between fields, wakes into a trap it did not feel being set. The first awareness belongs to the one who rises early, the servant who steps into the open and looks outward to begin the day's tasks. The text does not give his name, but it gives his sight. He sees the horses, the chariots, the surrounding host. In that moment, the morning's coolness would seem suddenly sharpened, as though the air had turned to glass. The landscape that had been familiar, ridgelines, slopes, scrub, becomes a theater of danger. The ground is the same, but the meaning of every contour changes. A path becomes a corridor for invasion, a wall becomes inadequate. The distance to the nearest armed man becomes a measure of how quickly death could arrive. The human body responds before the mind can arrange words. Breath catches, hands go cold, the throat tightens, a sense of weight gathers in the stomach, heavy and sinking. It is not only fear of pain, it is the fear of inevitability, the fear that there is nowhere to go. The eyes flick quickly, counting, tracing possible exits, seeing none that are not already watched. Even the sounds of morning, the call of a bird, the small movements of waking households would feel wrong, too ordinary for such a threat, as if the world were mocking the sudden fragility of life. He turns to Elisha. There is urgency, panic, the raw instinct to seek direction from someone who seems steadier. The text gives his cry in brief, but we need not add to it. It is enough to know that terror spoke through him. In contrast, Elisha's composure is described without drama. He does not run. He does not rally men to arms. He does not negotiate. He speaks with an assurance that is not the bravado of a soldier, but the stillness of one who believes the visible is not the whole. And then he prays. Not a theatrical prayer, not an appeal to impress, but a simple request that his servant's eyes would be opened. The power here is already moving in a direction that is unexpected. Before any external event is changed, perception is changed. Fear is confronted not by removing the threat, but by revealing what had been present unseen. The hills around Dothan, in that light, are described as filled with horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. The text is spare, but it is enough to suggest a reality layered over the ordinary landscape, like heat shimmering above stone, except unimaginably more weighty. One can linger on what such a sight implies without inventing detail that is not given. That the same ridges the servant saw lined with enemy forces were also, in another sense, lined with a presence beyond human deployment. Fire is not silent in the human imagination. It signifies heat, radiance, danger, purity, and awe. Yet these chariots do not burn the hills. They do not consume the shrubs. They do not set the fields ablaze. They exist as a boundary and a declaration. And the servant who moments ago could barely breathe in panic would feel something shift inside him. Not necessarily comfort like ease, but a change in scale. His fear is no longer the only thing in the world. Then the narrative turns outward again, back to the Syrian forces. They have come with a clear intention. They have surrounded a town. They believe they control the morning. They are men trained to act with coordination, to advance on command, to seize, to bind, to kill if resisted. Their horses stamp and toss their heads, sensing the tension, smelling other animals, feeling the press of too many bodies too close together. Leather creaks. Metal catches the first glints of sunrise. The officers' eyes move, alert, ready for movement from within the town. They are prepared for a chase, for a brief skirmish, for the contained violence of an arrest carried out under threat. But Elisha prays again, this time not to open eyes, but to strike the approaching company with blindness. The text says that the Lord smote them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. Here, power is shown not as an explosion, not as earth cracking open, but as a sudden alteration of the most basic human faculty. Blindness is not merely darkness, it is disorientation. It is the collapse of certainty. A man who cannot see loses more than scenery. He loses distance, formation, direction, the confidence that his next step will land where intended. For soldiers, it is catastrophic. Their training depends on sight, reading signals, holding lines, gauging the enemy. When sight is removed, rank becomes confusion in an instant. Imagine, without exaggeration, the physical reality of such a moment. A rider blinks and the world does not return. He turns his head sharply, as if the movement itself might bring clarity, and it does not. Another reaches out instinctively, grabbing at the mane of his horse, tightening his knees, suddenly afraid of being thrown because the ground's relationship to his body is no longer reliably known. Men call out, not in planned commands, but in startled, uncontrolled voices. Someone begins to curse, not as bravado, but as shock. Horses, responding to the sudden tension of their riders and the irregular movement around them, sidestep and press into one another. Harnesses strain, a chariot wheel scrapes against stone. In the confusion, the ordered geometry of a military encirclement begins to unravel, not because an enemy has attacked, but because the senses that held the formation together have been withdrawn. And within that chaos, a strange restraint occurs. The Syrians do not immediately lash out at the town with blind violence. They do not slaughter in the dark. They are too disoriented, too uncertain. Blindness makes even aggression hesitant. Where would one strike? At what? The fear that rises in them is a different fear than the servants' earlier terror. It is the fear of being helpless while still armed. The fear that one's weapon is now as likely to harm friend as foe. In that moment, each man becomes isolated inside his own body, his own darkness, his own loss of bearings. The collective identity of the host dissolves into individuals groping, listening, trying to locate one another by voice, by touch, by the sound of footsteps and the snort of horses. It is then that Elisha approaches them. The text records his guidance. He tells them they have come the wrong way, that this is not the city, that he will bring them to the man they seek, and he leads them to Samaria. We do not need to expand the words beyond what is written. What matters is what it means for a blind company, horses, chariots, armed men, to be led step by careful step away from their target and into the heart of their enemy's capital. Consider the distance, the terrain, the sheer vulnerability of movement without sight. The road would not be smooth, paths wind, the ground rises and falls, stones shift underfoot. A blind man must move differently, shuffling at times, reaching with his foot for the next secure place. A blind rider must rely on his horse, on the pull of another's rein, on the voice ahead calling out direction. The pace slows. The confident march becomes a cautious procession. The very sound of such a group would change, less the crisp rhythm of organized movement and more the uneven, anxious noises of men trying not to stumble. The sun by then would be higher, its warmth growing. Heat would begin to lift from stones, dust would cling to sweat, throats would dry. And for those who cannot see, every sensation becomes sharper and more alarming. The sound of birds could be mistaken for something else. The rustle of wind in shrubs might feel like an approaching threat. A sudden shout within the group could cause an involuntary flinch, a jerk of the shoulders, a tightening of grip on weapons that now feel more like burdens than instruments of control. They are led into Samaria, the capital, into a place of walls and gates, of built stone and human authority. Cities have their own atmosphere. The air holds different smells: cooking fires, animals, refuse, sweat, oil, dampness in shaded corners. Sounds echo differently against stone. Footsteps are multiplied, voices overlap. Even without sight, one would know entry into a city by the change in acoustics, by the narrowing of space, by the sense of being enclosed. The gate itself would be felt as a threshold, a brief constriction, then a release into a wider interior. For an enemy force to pass through that threshold, blind is almost beyond belief, and yet the text presents it as fact, as the direct result of power they could not resist. Then, once inside, Elisha prays again, that their eyes may be opened. Sight returns, and with it the shock of location. The sudden recognition would strike like a physical blow. A man who believes himself on a hillside outside Dothan opens his eyes to find walls, armed Israelites, the unmistakable features of an enemy capital. In that instant, blood drains from faces, hands tighten on weapons, then hesitate because the situation is inverted. They are surrounded, not surrounding. A commander's mind races through impossible calculations, trying to understand how his entire force has been moved like a piece on a board. Some would look for escape routes instinctively, only to see gates behind them, guards above, spear points catching light. The air would feel heavier, not because the sun has changed, but because realization has weight. The king of Israel, seeing them, asks Elisha whether he should strike them down. This is the point where many would expect the story to become one of massacre and triumph, but the text does not go there. Elisha forbids it. He directs that they be given bread and water, that they eat and drink, and then be sent away to their master. So the king prepares a great provision for them, and after they have eaten and drunk, he sends them away. The Syrians return, and the text adds that the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. In the immediate moment, the reaction among the Syrians would be almost as difficult to bear as fear. To be spared can be humiliating when one expected to dominate. To be fed by one's enemy is a reversal that cuts deeper than defeat. It places a man under the mercy of those he intended to bind. Eating in such a context would not be like eating at home. Hands would be unsteady, mouths dry. The body needs food, but the mind is still trying to regain its balance. Some would swallow too quickly and cough. Some would stare down at bread as if it were an object from another world, unsure if it was safe, unsure how to hold themselves. Eye contact would be avoided. Pride would have nowhere to go. The room, or the courtyard, however the provision was arranged, would be full of a tense quiet, the kind of quiet that is not peace but astonishment restrained by survival instinct. And among the Israelites too, the reaction would not be simple. Soldiers who expected battle now stand watching enemies eat. The muscles that had braced for violence must unbrace slowly. Hands that had tightened around weapons must loosen. A man who has rehearsed in his mind the motion of striking must now swallow that motion, must let it go. There is a particular strain in being told not to do what fear and adrenaline have prepared you to do. It requires restraint that feels like holding back a flood. Yet the order stands, and the moment becomes something different than victory. It becomes a demonstration that the outcome was never in human hands to begin with. The city remains intact, not because its walls were higher, but because power altered the entire sequence of intention and control. After the Syrians depart, the days that follow would carry a different kind of silence. People would return to ordinary routines, drawing water, tending animals, working fields, but the ordinary would feel subtly changed. The roads outside Dothan would still be the same roads. The hills would still catch morning light in the same way. Yet those who witnessed or heard the account firsthand would look at ridgelines and remember how quickly a host had appeared and how completely that host had been rendered helpless without a struggle. There would be empty spaces where panic had surged and then receded. There would be conversations spoken in low voices, not to spread excitement, but to confirm details, to reassure the mind that it had not imagined what it had learned. For the servant who first saw the encirclement, the memory would be lodged in the body. He would remember the first shock, the cold tightening of fear, the dryness of his throat. He would remember, too, the moment when what he could not see was revealed, and how that revelation did not remove danger, but redefined it. Such experiences do not leave a person unchanged. They alter the way one looks at morning light on stone. They make the world feel layered, as though the visible surface is never the full account. For the Syrians who returned to their master, the journey back would be heavy with unspoken things. Soldiers talk, but there are events that make speech difficult. How does a man describe blindness imposed in an instant? How does he describe being led like a child into the center of an enemy city? Even if he speaks plainly, he risks sounding as though he is making excuses. Yet silence too is perilous because commanders demand explanation. So words would come out awkwardly, in fragments, the loss of sight, the strange, calm voice that guided them, the sudden opening of eyes within Samaria's walls, the meal, the release. Those who hear such a report might frown, might scoff, might grow quiet in a way that signals fear masked as skepticism. Leaders are uneasy when confronted with something that cannot be countered by strategy. A sword can be met with a shield. A fortress can be besieged. But what can be done against power that can open eyes, close eyes, and move armies without resistance? And so the bands came no more into the land of Israel, at least for a time, at least in the manner described. The text gives that as a consequence, and it is fitting, because the event itself is a warning written into the nerves of those who survived it. Not a warning delivered as a speech, but as a lived reversal. Men who have once been rendered blind at the moment of their greatest confidence do not easily volunteer for a second humiliation. Even if orders are given, the body remembers. Fear returns not as panic, but as hesitation, as the slowing of steps, as the small reluctance that spreads through a group before a march begins. Now, if one were to stand in that region long afterward, when the urgency of that morning has passed into history, the hills would still remain, patient and indifferent. Wind would still move through grasses. Stones would still hold the day's heat and release it at dusk. Paths would still wind between terraces, worn by countless feet that never knew the names of those soldiers. The town itself might change. Walls repaired, houses rebuilt, generations replacing generations. But the geology persists. Ridges do not forget, yet they do not speak. They simply endure. And in that enduring landscape, one can imagine the quiet residue of the event, not as a visible scar, but as a remembered shape in the minds of those who tell it. There are no ruins described, no monument raised in the text. The remains are not stone and ash, but altered certainty. The epilogue is a kind of hush, an awareness that human sight, human planning, human strength can be gathered in great number and still be undone by a power that does not need to meet force with force. The evidence is in the absence, the raid that does not come, the host that turns away, the morning that remains undisturbed when it might have been filled with cries. In the late afternoon, when the sun lowers and shadows lengthen, the hills around Dothan take on a gentler color. Gold on stone, a softening of the harshness that midday imposes. Evening breezes arrive, carrying the faint sense of earth cooling, of vegetation releasing its day-held warmth. In such a time, a person might sit near a doorway and listen to ordinary sounds, distant voices, the movement of animals settling, the occasional clink of a vessel being set down. And beneath that ordinary surface, the mind could return to the memory of a morning when an entire armed company was made helpless, then spared, then sent away. An event that did not end with smoke and rubble, but with food eaten in silence and footsteps departing without pursuit. Thank you for accompanying this journey through that restrained, unsettling moment in the hills of Israel. I'm grateful you chose to spend this time here, and I hope the quiet weight of the account stays with you as gently as the evening light on stone.